The ink was barely dry on the marriage certificate when Kai Nakamura realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Not the part where he'd sign away 18 months of his freedom to keep his little sister's medical bills from drowning his family. Though that cut deep, a bone-deep ache that lived in his chest alongside the permanent guilt of being the eldest Omega son who couldn't provide enough. No, the real mistake was standing across from him in the sterile county clerk's office, smelling like cedarwood and snowmelt, looking at Kai like he was already calculating how to grade him out of existence. Professor Alexander Volkov, 34. Tenured. Untouchable. The coldest alpha on Viridian University's architecture faculty, a man whose lectures felt less like education and more like professional demolition. His red pen had reduced Kai's most ambitious portfolio pieces to graveyards of uninspired and structurally unsound scribbled in the margins. For the past 8 months, Kai had perfected the art of disappearing into lecture hall seats, arriving 30 seconds before the bell and slipping out before Alexander's low, deliberate voice could finish its final critique. And now they were legally bound. The whole thing had been a blur of desperation and fine print. Kai's father had emptied their savings, taken out loans he couldn't repay. All for Naomi's treatment, her rare blood disorder that didn't care about their insurance limits or their middle-class dreams. The bank was 45 days from foreclosing on the only home Kai had ever known, his grandmother's house, with its cherry blossom tree in the backyard and the kitchen window that caught the morning light just right. Then the offer came. A wealthy Russian-American family needed a spouse for their heir. A contract marriage to fulfill a grandfather's will. Requirements: an Omega, no criminal record, no scandals, willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement thicker than any of Kai's textbooks. In exchange, all family debts cleared, a trust fund for Naomi's ongoing care, and a monthly stipend until the marriage's termination. It wasn't a choice. It was a lifeline with teeth. Kai had never seen the Alpha's face. The lawyers had referred to him only as Client V, citing security concerns and family reputation. Kai had imagined someone older, someone bored with the institution, someone who'd treat this as the transaction it was and leave him alone. He'd never imagined the sharp-cut jaw of Alexander Volkov, the way his broad shoulders filled out a tailored black suit, the way his scent, that devastating cedarwood and snow, had hit Kai like a physical force the moment they'd stepped into the same room. Now, standing in the parking lot of the county clerk's office, the afternoon sun mocking the chill in Kai's bones, the full weight of what he'd done pressed down on his ribcage. Alexander removed his wire-rimmed glasses, polishing them with a cloth he produced from somewhere inside his jacket. The gesture was precise, almost surgical. His dark hair was swept back from his forehead, not a single strand out of place, and his gray eyes, pale as winter skies, studied Kai with an expression that revealed absolutely nothing. Nakamura. The Alpha's voice was low, accented with something Eastern European that curled around the edges of his words. He said the name like he was reading it off a grading rubric. This is inconvenient. Kai's inner Omega bristled at the word. Inconvenient. Like Kai was a scheduling conflict, not a human being who just signed away a piece of his life. You think I wanted this? You think I woke up this morning and thought, what would fix everything? Marrying the professor who told my studio project looked like a parking garage's depressed cousin? Alexander's lips pressed into a thin line. Your cantilever design was structurally unsound. My critique was accurate, regardless of our current circumstances. I didn't know about the circumstances. The lawyers said, Client V. I thought you were some rich heir, not... Kai gestured wildly at all 6 feet 2 inches of Alpha standing before him. Not you. A flicker of something. Amusement? Irritation crossed Alexander's face. The contract listed only your last name. I assumed someone older, less prone to emotional outbursts. He folded his glasses and slipped them into his breast pocket. Apparently, fate has a twisted sense of humor. The lawyers had made one thing exceptionally clear. This marriage stayed secret. No public acknowledgement. No cohabitation on record. For Alexander, it was about tenure. Fraternization with students was grounds for immediate dismissal, and the university's ethics board had teeth. For Kai, it was about keeping his scholarship, his sister's care, his family's home. But as they stood there, 2 feet of hostile distance between them, Kai realized the real problem wasn't the secrecy. It was the way his body was responding to Alexander's scent. The way his hindbrain was whispering alpha, mate, safe, even while his conscious mind was screaming run, hide, this man hates you. He was an Omega, 22 years old, and he just bonded himself to an alpha who'd probably rather fail him than share a breathing space with him. Alexander reached into his jacket and produced a folded sheet of paper. Here are the terms of our arrangement. Read them carefully. Kai unfolded the paper. It was typed single-space with bullet points. Residence. I maintain an apartment off campus. You will have a separate bedroom. I expect quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Campus. You are my student. I am your professor. No exceptions. No acknowledgement. No prolonged eye contact. Suppression. You will maintain suppressant protocols at all times. Your heat cycles will be managed privately. I will not be involved. Termination. The marriage will be dissolved after 18 months. No claim on assets. No ongoing obligations. It read like a lease agreement for a storage unit. Kai's hands trembled as he folded it back up. You've thought about this. I've had 6 weeks to prepare, Alexander said. I suggest you use the drive to my apartment to compose yourself. You smell like distress, and it's... He paused, his jaw tightening. It's distracting. Kai's face flushed. His scent. Of course. He'd been so stressed he'd forgotten to double his suppressants this morning, and now his anxious omega pheromones were bleeding into the air around him. He could smell himself too, green tea and honey, the Nakamura family scent, tinged with a sharp bitterness of fear. He hated that Alexander could read him so easily. Fine, Kai said, shoving the paper into his bag. But don't expect me to be grateful. This isn't a marriage. It's a hostage situation with better furniture. Alexander's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. I don't expect gratitude, Nakamura. I expect compliance. He turned toward a sleek black Audi parked 3 spaces away. Follow me. Try to keep up. Kai watched him go, his fists clenched at his sides. His inner Omega was doing something complicated, part terror, part reluctant fascination, and something else entirely. Something that smelled like curiosity. He crushed it down, got into his beat-up Honda, and followed the Alpha to his apartment. The apartment was a monument to Alexander Volkov's particular brand of control. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, the afternoon light catching on surfaces so clean they seemed to repel dust. The furniture was minimalist, black leather couch, chrome and glass coffee table, bookshelves filled with architecture texts and design journals arranged by height and color. The walls held a single piece of art, a charcoal sketch of a suspension bridge, and signed, framed in matte black. Kai's designated bedroom was down a hallway to the left, past a guest bathroom and a door that presumably led to Alexander's private wing. The room was small but immaculate, a queen bed with gray linens, a desk with a reading lamp, a closet empty except for wooden hangers. It smelled like nothing, literally nothing, as if the Alpha had gone out of his way to erase any trace of his own scent from the space. Kai set his duffel bag on the bed and stood there, staring at the blank walls. His grandmother's house had wallpaper with tiny flowers. Naomi's room was covered in anime posters. This place felt like a hotel designed by someone who'd never been hugged. A knock on the doorframe made him turn. Alexander stood there, having changed out of his suit jacket into a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look even broader across the shoulders. His sleeves were pushed up to his elbows, revealing forearms dusted with dark hair and crossed with pale scars. Old ones, faded, the kind that told stories Kai wasn't sure he wanted to hear. The kitchen is communal, Alexander said. I've stocked the refrigerator with basics. You're welcome to prepare your own meals. I eat at irregular hours, so I won't impose. Impose, Kai repeated flatly. Right? Wouldn't want to impose on my husband. Something flickered in Alexander's gray eyes, irritation, maybe, or the ghost of something softer. This arrangement is temporary. I suggest we treat it as a professional partnership rather than a what? A marriage? Bonding? Kai stepped forward, and he knew he shouldn't push, knew he should keep his head down and survive the next 18 months. But his Omega was restless, and his pride was bruised, and Alexander's scent was everywhere, cedarwood and snow, and it was making his thoughts fuzzy. You sign a contract that says we're legally bound. That's not professional. That's intimate. Whether you like it or not. Alexander's jaw tightened. For a moment, Kai thought he saw the Alpha's pupils dilate. Just slightly, just enough to notice, and then it was gone, replaced by that same careful blankness. Control your scent, Nakamura, Alexander said quietly. You're broadcasting distress, and I'm trying very hard to ignore it. Before Kai could respond, the Alpha turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Kai stood there, trembling, and realized his suppressants were wearing off faster than usual. Stress did that, burned through medication like paper through flame. He fumbled in his bag for the pill bottle, dry swallowed 2 tablets, and leaned against the doorframe until his heart stopped racing. This was going to be hell. The first week was a masterclass in avoidance. Kai learned Alexander's schedule by heart, up at 5:30 a.m., coffee in the kitchen, out the door by 6:15. Kai adjusted his own rhythm to 5:45, late enough to miss the Alpha, early enough to grab breakfast before his own commute. He'd make instant oatmeal and toast, eat standing at the counter, and slip out the door while Alexander's side of the apartment remained silent. On campus, it was worse. Alexander's lectures were brutal, his critiques surgical. When he called on Kai to explain the load-bearing failures in his residential tower model, his gray eyes were as cold as winter in St. Petersburg, and his words cut just as deep. The aesthetic is derivative, Nakamura, Alexander said, projecting Kai's model onto the lecture hall screen. You've prioritized visual interest over structural logic. The eastern facade will fail under wind shear within a decade. I expect a complete redesign by Friday. If it's not up to standard, I'll have no choice but to recommend your withdrawal from the program. The class went silent. Kai could feel the other students' eyes on him. Some sympathetic, some relieved it wasn't them. His Omega wanted to curl into a ball and hide. His pride made him lift his chin and meet Alexander's gaze head-on. Yes, Professor Volkov, he said, his voice steady despite the shake in his hands. After class, his best friend Sasha cornered him in the hallway. Sasha was a beta, which meant he couldn't smell the humiliation bleeding off Kai's skin, but he could read his best friend's face well enough. Dude, Sasha said, his dark eyes wide. What the hell was that? He's never been that harsh with anyone. Kai shrugged, shoving his sketchbook into his backpack. He's just being thorough. Thorough? He basically called your work garbage in front of 60 people. Sasha lowered his voice. Look, I know you're an Omega and he's an Alpha and the whole dynamic thing is complicated. But if he's targeting you because of your secondary gender, you should report him. Kai almost laughed. Report his secret husband for discrimination? Sure. That would go well. It's fine, Kai said, forcing a smile. I'll fix it. Don't worry. That night, Kai stayed up until 2 a.m. reworking his design, his eyes burning, his neck aching from hunching over his drafting table. He just finished the revised wind shear calculations, 3 times, because his brain was too tired to trust itself, when his stomach growled loud enough to echo. He'd skipped dinner. Again. He grabbed his hoodie, gray, worn, soft, one of the few things that still smelled like his grandmother's house, and padded to the kitchen. Alexander was there. The Alpha sat at the kitchen island, a steaming mug of tea in front of him, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as Kai entered, his expression unreadable. His scent was subdued, suppressants probably, but Kai could still catch traces of cedarwood beneath the neutralizer. It's past your curfew, Alexander said. I don't have a curfew, Kai said, opening the refrigerator. I have quiet hours, which I'm respecting by getting food and leaving. He pulled out leftover rice and a container of vegetables, dumped them into a bowl, and microwaved them. The hum of the microwave filled the silence between them. Alexander set down his tablet. The revised design. You recalculated the eastern facade's wind load. Kai's hand stilled. Yes. Did you account for the building's proximity to the river? The wind patterns change within 200 meters of a water source. Kai turned to face him. Alexander was still sitting at the island, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. He wasn't looking at Kai like a professor critiquing a student. He was looking at him like he cared about the answer. I factored a 12% increase in lateral pressure, Kai said slowly. The soil composition reports suggested the foundation could handle up to 15% before sheer failure. A flicker of something. Surprise? Approval crossed Alexander's face. Acceptable. But you'll need to reinforce the third-floor transfer beams. The current design creates a stress concentration that will propagate through the upper levels. Kai stared at him. This was actual feedback. Constructive feedback. Not the usual demolition by Redpin. Why are you telling me this? Alexander picked up his tea, took a slow sip. Because I don't fail students who have potential. I fail those who refuse to reach it. He set the mug down. You have potential, Nakamura. When you bother to apply it. There it was again, that almost compliment wrapped in a criticism. But beneath his words, Kai caught something else. A shift in Alexander's scent, so faint he almost missed it. Something warm beneath the cedarwood. Something that smelled like interest. Kai's omega perked up. Alpha likes. Alpha approves. He crushed the thought immediately. Thanks, he mumbled, turning back to the microwave. Alexander didn't respond. A moment later, Kai heard him stand, his footsteps crossing the kitchen. Then, from behind Kai's shoulder, his voice, closer than expected. Your hoodie. It smells like your family home. Cherry blossoms and old wood. Kai froze. He hadn't realized Alexander could smell that. Suppressants dulled scent, but they didn't erase it entirely, and an alpha's nose was always sharper than an omega's. It's my grandmother's, Kai said quietly. She gave it to me before she got sick. A pause. Then so soft Kai almost missed it. I'm sorry. The microwave beeped. Kai pulled out his bowl, the steam fogging his glasses. When he turned around, Alexander was already halfway down the hallway, disappearing into his wing of the apartment. Kai ate alone in the kitchen, his grandmother's hoodie wrapped around him like armor, and tried not to think about the warmth he'd heard in Alexander's voice. The second week brought rain. Not the gentle spring rain that Kai's hometown was known for, but a relentless, pounding storm that turned the walk from the parking lot to the architecture building into a gauntlet of puddles and wind. By the time Kai reached Alexander's lecture, he was soaked through. His shirt clinging to his skin, his hair plastered to his forehead, his scent probably broadcasting misery across the entire room. He slid into his seat near the back, hoping no one would notice. Sasha shot him a concerned look. Kai shook his head slightly, I'm fine, and pulled out his notebook. But throughout the lecture, he couldn't concentrate. His suppressants were wearing off faster than usual. The stress of the past 2 weeks had been burning through his system, and his inner omega was restless, anxious, reacting to something in the air that he couldn't quite identify. Then he realized what it was. Alexander's scent was stronger than usual. Not overwhelming, but present in a way it hadn't been before. Cedarwood and snow, yes, but underneath something darker. Something that smelled like pine forests after a fire, like earth after lightning. Kai's hindbrain lit up. Alpha. Alpha is here. Alpha is close. He pressed his thighs together under the desk, suddenly aware of the warmth building low in his belly. No. His heat wasn't due for another 3 weeks. He'd taken his suppressants this morning. This shouldn't be happening. But his body didn't care about schedules and medication. His body smelled alpha, smelled his alpha, the one on the marriage certificate, the one who'd said inconvenient like Kai was a scheduling conflict, and it was responding. By the time the lecture ended, Kai was shaking. He gathered his things with trembling hands, trying to be the first one out the door, but Sasha caught his arm. Kai, you okay? You smell. I'm fine, Kai said too fast. I need to go. He practically ran out of the lecture hall, down the stairs, toward the exit. But he didn't make it. His vision blurred at the edges, his knees buckled, and he caught himself against the wall, breathing hard. Kai. Alexander's voice. Close. Too close. Kai looked up. The Alpha stood in the hallway, his briefcase in one hand, his gray eyes fixed on Kai with an intensity that made Kai's Omega whimper. "You're going into heat," Alexander said. It wasn't a question. "No," Kai said, though his body was betraying him, warmth pooling in his abdomen, slick gathering at places he refused to think about. "I took my suppressants. I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're preheat, and your suppressants are failing." Alexander's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, and Kai could smell him now. Full force, no neutralizer, cedarwood and snow and that dark undertone of pine fire earth. "How long have you been on this dosage?" I don't know." "A year. Your body's developed a tolerance." Alexander's voice was calm, clinical, but his pupils were dilated. His Alpha was responding to Kai's distress, whether he wanted to or not. "You need a higher dose, or you need to ride out the heat in a safe environment. You cannot be on campus when it hits fully." Kai's eyes widened. I can't go home. My dad would know something's wrong. He can't find out about the marriage." Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took Kai's elbow. His hand was warm, broad, and the touch sent a shockwave through Kai's system. Pleasure and terror tangled together. "You're coming with me," Alexander said. "My apartment has a nest room. It's soundproofed, climate-controlled, and stocked with emergency supplies for situations like this." Kai stared at him. "You have a nest room. I have resources. My family." Alexander cut himself off, his expression tightening. "It doesn't matter. What matters is that you cannot be here when your heat peaks. The entire building would know within an hour. And I cannot." He stopped, took a breath. "I cannot let that happen." There was something in his voice that Kai hadn't heard before. Fear? No, not fear. Something like protectiveness, buried so deep it barely surfaced. Kai nodded, because he didn't have another option. "Okay." Alexander led him out of the building, one hand steady on Kai's elbow. His body angled to block Kai from view as they walked through the rain to the parking lot. By the time they reached the Audi, Kai was shivering, from cold, from heat, from the overwhelming sensory input of his Alpha's scent wrapped around him like a blanket. Alexander opened the passenger door. "Get in. I'll take care of the rest." Kai got in. He didn't have the strength to argue. The nest room was unlike anything Kai had ever seen. It was located at the far end of Alexander's wing of the apartment, behind a door that required both a key and a thumbprint scanner. Inside, the room was warm, almost too warm, with soft lighting and walls covered in sound-dampening panels. In the center of the room was a bed large enough for 3 people, piled with blankets and pillows in every texture imaginable: fleece, cotton, silk, wool. The air smelled like Alexander's cedarwood scent, but muted, as if the room had been designed to contain rather than broadcast. Kai's Omega practically purred. "Nest. Safe. Alpha made nest." "Don't read into it," Alexander said, as if reading his thoughts. "The room was installed when I bought the apartment. My family insisted on it for emergencies. I've never used it." Kai looked at him. Alexander stood in the doorway, his posture rigid, his hands shoved into his pockets. His scent was carefully controlled, but Kai could smell the effort it was taking. The Alpha's instincts were screaming at him to enter the nest, to claim, to protect. "You don't have to stay," Kai said, though every fiber of his being wanted the opposite. I can handle it alone." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Your heat is going to last 48 to 72 hours. You'll need food, water, temperature regulation." And he paused, his gray eyes meeting Kai's. "You'll need scent." Omegas in heat without Alpha scent experience severe distress. It can be dangerous. Are you offering? The question hung between them. Alexander crossed his arms over his chest. "I'm offering to provide basic care. Nothing more. We're married on paper, Nakamura. That doesn't mean I'll take advantage of you in a vulnerable state." Kai should have been relieved. Instead, he felt a strange pang of disappointment. His Omega wanted to be claimed. Wanted Alexander's teeth on his neck, his scent marking Kai's skin, his body. He shut down that line of thinking immediately. "Fine," Kai said, stepping into the nest room. The warmth wrapped around him like a blanket, and he felt some of the tension drain from his shoulders. "But if you're staying, you need to take off your jacket. Your scent is strongest on your clothes, and he flushed, embarrassed. "I need it." "For the nest." Alexander raised an eyebrow, but he didn't argue. He shrugged off his suit jacket, folded it neatly, and handed it to Kai. Then he removed his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and sat on the edge of the bed, carefully, as if he was afraid of disturbing the carefully arranged pillows. Kai took the jacket and buried his face in it. Cedar wood and snow. His alpha's scent. His omega relaxed instantly, the desperate edge of the preheat fading into something almost manageable. "This is weird," Kai mumbled into the fabric. "This is so weird." "I'm aware," Alexander said dryly. "But given the circumstances, I believe weird is the least of our concerns." Kai laughed, a surprised, breathless sound, and Alexander's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. For the first time since the marriage certificate had been signed, Kai thought maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't completely destroy him. The heat hit fully 6 hours later. Kai had been dozing on the nest bed, Alexander's jacket pressed to his chest, when the first real wave crashed over him. His skin flushed hot, his muscles spasmed, and a sound escaped his throat, half gasp, half whimper, that he'd never made before. Alexander was at his side instantly. "How bad?" "Bad," Kai managed, his voice thick. It's early. It shouldn't be this strong. You've been suppressing for too long." Alexander's voice was calm, but his hand when he touched Kai's forehead was shaking slightly. "Your body's compensating by hitting harder. I need you to drink something." He pressed a bottle of water into Kai's hands. Kai tried to drink, but his coordination was failing, the heat making his fingers clumsy. Water spilled down his chin, and he made a frustrated sound. Alexander took the bottle back. "Open your mouth." Kai obeyed without thinking, and Alexander tilted the bottle, letting Kai drink in small, controlled sips. The alpha's other hand rested on the back of Kai's neck, steadying him, and the touch sent fireworks through Kai's nervous system. "Mark me. Claim me." But Kai pulled away, breathing hard. You should go. It's going to get worse." "I know. If you stay, I'm going to want things. Things you probably don't." "Nakamura." Alexander's voice was soft. "Look at me." Kai looked. Alexander's gray eyes were dark, his pupils blown wide. His scent had shifted, the cedarwood and snow now layered with something deeper, something primal. His alpha was present, fully present, and he was barely holding himself back. "I want things too," Alexander said quietly. "I've wanted them since the moment I smelled you in that clerk's office. Green tea and honey. Like nothing I've ever—" He stopped, his jaw working. "But I won't take advantage of you. Not like this. Not when you can't consent fully." Kai's heart hammered. "What if I'm consenting anyway?" Alexander closed his eyes. When he opened them, there was something raw in his expression, something Kai had never seen before. "Then you need to tell me exactly what you want. Because once I start, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." Kai reached out, trembling, and touched Alexander's face. The alpha's stubble was rough against his palm, his skin warm. He traced the line of Alexander's jaw, the curve of his cheekbone, the spot just below his ear where his scent was strongest. "I want you to stay," Kai whispered. "I want you to hold me. He swallowed, his omega screaming at him to say it. "I want you to scent me. Claim me. Make me yours." Something broke behind Alexander's eyes. He moved slowly, agonizingly slowly, giving Kai every chance to pull away. His hand slid to the back of Kai's neck, his thumb pressing against Kai's scent gland. The touch made Kai moan, his body arching into Alexander's. "You're sure?" Alexander asked, his lips brushing Kai's ear. "I've never been more sure of anything." Alexander kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was the kiss of an alpha who'd been holding himself back for weeks, hungry, desperate, claiming. His tongue slid against Kai's, and Kai tasted cedarwood on his lips, felt the alpha's pheromones flooding his system, pushing his heat hotter. Kai wrapped his arms around Alexander's neck, pulling him down onto the nest bed. The pillows shifted around them, cocooning them in fabric and scent. Alexander's body was heavy on top of him, solid and warm, and Kai needed more. Clothes, Kai gasped. Too many clothes. Alexander pulled back just long enough to strip off his sweater. Kai stared at his chest, broad, sculpted, covered in dark hair and more of those pale scars. He wanted to ask about them, wanted to trace each one with his tongue, but his heat was cresting, and his thoughts were dissolving into static. "My turn," Alexander murmured, and his hands found the hem of Kai's shirt. He pulled it off slowly, reverence in his touch. When Kai's bare skin met the cool air, he shivered, but then Alexander's hands were on him, warm and broad, sliding up his sides, and the shiver turned into a shudder of pleasure. "Beautiful," Alexander breathed. "You're beautiful, Kai." Kai's omega preened under the praise. He arched into Alexander's touch, offering his throat, his chest, every vulnerable part of himself. And Alexander took, not greedily, not roughly, but with a tenderness that made Kai's eyes sting. The alpha kissed down his neck, over his collarbone, pausing at the scent gland where Kai's green tea and honey was strongest. He pressed his lips there, inhaling deeply, and Kai felt something unlock in his chest. "Mine," Alexander whispered against his skin. "Yours," Kai agreed. And when Alexander's teeth finally sank into the juncture of his neck and shoulder, claiming, marking, bonding, Kai's vision went white with pleasure. The bond settled over the next 3 days. Kai barely remembered most of it. Heat-hazed fragments of sensation and scent, Alexander's hands and mouth and voice anchoring him through wave after wave of need. By the time his fever broke, he was exhausted, sore, and wrapped in a cocoon of blankets that smelled overwhelmingly of cedarwood and green tea tangled together. He opened his eyes to find Alexander watching him from the other side of the nest bed. The alpha looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled, his jaw shadowed with stubble, but his expression was soft in a way Kai had never seen before. "Welcome back," Alexander said quietly. Kai tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the pillows. "How long?" 71 hours. "You almost made it to 3 days. Kai's face flushed. We did." Alexander's voice was carefully neutral, but his scent betrayed him, warm, protective, possessive. "You asked me to stay. You asked me to claim you. I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. Do you regret it?" The question came out smaller than Kai intended. Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he reached across the nest and took Kai's hand, threading their fingers together. "I regret the circumstances," Alexander said slowly. "I regret that your first heat in our arrangement happened in a panic, that you didn't have proper suppressants, that you felt unsafe on campus. But I don't regret you. I don't regret claiming you." He lifted Kai's hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to his knuckles. "You're my husband, Kai. On paper and now otherwise. I don't take that lightly." Kai's chest ached. "You called this inconvenient. When we first got married, it was inconvenient." "I was lying." "About which part?" Alexander met his eyes. "About not wanting you." Something shifted between them, a wall coming down, a door opening. Kai squeezed Alexander's hand. It didn't let go. Life after the bond was different. Not easier. There were still deadlines and lectures and the constant pressure of keeping their marriage secret from the university. But the hostility was gone, replaced by something fragile and new. Alexander still criticized Kai's designs in class, still used that cold, surgical tone that made freshmen cry. But now Kai could smell the warmth beneath it, could catch the way Alexander's eyes lingered on him a moment too long, the way his scent softened when Kai answered a question correctly. At home, they fell into a routine. Kai would make dinner, he was better at it, and Alexander's attempts at cooking were efficient but joyless, according to Kai, and they'd eat together at the kitchen island, talking about their days. Alexander would leave architecture journals open on the counter, pages marked with passages relevant to Kai's current projects. Kai would make Alexander coffee in the mornings, leaving it on the counter with a sticky note shaped like a heart. Neither of them acknowledged the sticky notes. Neither of them threw them away either. The first time Alexander smiled, really smiled, not the barely there twitch of lips Kai had seen before, was 3 weeks after the bond. Kai had just finished a presentation for their studio class, a mixed-use development designed to incorporate green space and affordable housing. He'd been nervous. Public speaking always made his hands shake, but he'd pushed through, and when he looked up at the end, Alexander was watching him with an expression that made Kai's heart stop. "Mr. Nakamura," Alexander said, his voice carrying across the studio. "That was the best work you've produced in this program. The structural integration is sound, the community engagement model is thoughtful, and the presentation was compelling." The class murmured in surprise. Alexander Volkov never gave compliments. Kai felt his face heat. "Thank you, Professor." After class, Alexander caught him in the hallway. "You did well. I know. You told me in front of everyone. I meant it." Alexander's hand brushed Kai's, just a touch gone too fast. "Dinner? I'll cook." "You can't cook. I can order takeout." "Same principle." Kai laughed, and Alexander's smile, that real rare smile, lit up his whole face. The threat came 3 months into the marriage. Her name was Dr. Irina Volkov, Alexander's older sister, a formidable alpha with the same gray eyes and a sharper smile. She showed up at the apartment unannounced, sweeping past Kai like he was furniture, and cornered Alexander in the kitchen. "You married a student," Irina said, her accent thicker than Alexander's. "A student, Sasha. Do you know what Papa would say?" Alexander stood with his back to the counter, his arms crossed. "Papa is dead. His will is the only reason this marriage exists. And you think he'd be pleased? He wanted you to find a respectable partner. An Omega from a good family, someone who could help with the business. Not," she gestured at Kai, who was standing in the doorway, trying to look like he wasn't listening. "Not this. Kai is my husband," Alexander said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will treat him with respect, or you will leave." Irina's eyes narrowed. "You bonded with him. I can smell it on you." She turned to Kai, her gaze sharp. "What did you do? Slip something into his drink? Manipulate his instincts?" Kai's Omega snarled. "I didn't do anything. He chose me, just like I chose him." Irina laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Chose? You're a contract bride, little Omega. You're a transaction. Don't pretend this is a love story." "Enough." Alexander stepped between them, his body blocking Irina's view of Kai. "You will leave now. If you contact Kai again without my permission, I will consider it harassment. And you know how our family handles harassment." Something flickered in Irina's eyes. Fear, maybe, or respect. She nodded once, turned on her heel, and walked out of the apartment without another word. The door closed behind her. Alexander stood there for a long moment, his back still to Kai, his shoulders tight. "Alexander," Kai said softly. "I'm sorry." Alexander's voice was rough. I should have warned you. You can't control your sister." Kai walked up behind him, pressed his forehead against the alpha's spine. "But thank you for standing up for me." Alexander turned, pulled Kai into his arms, and held him like he was something precious. "I meant what I said. You're my husband. Not a transaction. Not anymore." Kai buried his face in Alexander's chest, breathing in cedarwood and snow. "I know." The real crisis came during finals week. Kai had been running on caffeine and adrenaline for days, his final project due in 48 hours. He was in the architecture studio late, too late, past midnight, the building empty except for him and the ghosts of unfinished models. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know about the bond. Meet me in the north stairwell. Come alone, or I tell the dean." Kai's blood ran cold. He should have called Alexander. He knew he should have called Alexander. But his Omega was panicking, and his pride was screaming at him to handle it himself, and before he knew what he was doing, he was walking toward the north stairwell. The woman waiting for him was Beta, no sin to give her away, with curly brown hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dear Carter," Kai said, recognizing her from the faculty directory. "What do you want?" Dr. Julianne Carter, Alexander's colleague in the architecture department, stepped forward. "I want you to leave Viridian. Transfer to another university. In the marriage. Disappear." "Why?" "Because Alexander was supposed to be mine." Her smile twisted. "We were together for 2 years. He ended it when his father got sick, said he couldn't commit, said he needed to focus on the family business. And then I find out he's married to a student, a pathetic little omega who can't even design a proper load-bearing wall." Kai's hands clenched into fists. "My work is fine. Your work is mediocre. Your talent is average. The only reason you're passing is because Alexander is your husband." She pulled out her phone. "I have photos. The two of you leaving his apartment. The bond mark on your neck. If I send these to the dean, you're both finished." Kai's heart hammered. "What do you want?" "I told you. Leave. Transfer. In the marriage. Do it quietly, and I'll keep my evidence to myself." "And if I refuse?" Julianne smiled. "Then I destroy both of you." Kai didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bed, his separate bed, in the separate room, because even after the bond they'd kept up the pretense and stared at the ceiling. His mind raced through options, scenarios, escape routes. None of them worked. The next morning, he went to Alexander's room. The alpha was at his desk, grading papers, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when Kai entered, and his expression shifted immediately, reading Kai's distress in his sin, his posture, the tremor in his hands. "What happened?" Kai told him. Everything. Julianne's threats, the photos, the ultimatum. When he finished, Alexander was standing, his jaw tight, his scent sharp with protective rage. "She won't touch you," Alexander said. "I'll handle it." "Oh. If she goes to the dean, let her." Alexander crossed the room, took Kai's face in his hands. "I've been a professor for 7 years. I have tenure, resources, lawyers. Julianne has a grudge and a phone full of photos that prove nothing except that we live in the same building." He paused. "The bond mark. We can explain that. Emergency heat assistance. It happens. Alexander, if this gets out, then it gets out." Alexander's thumbs brushed Kai's cheekbones. "I'm not going to let her blackmail you. I'm not going to let her destroy what we've built." His voice softened. "I'm not going to lose you, Kai. Not like this." Kai's eyes burned. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." Alexander kissed him, soft, gentle, a promise, and Kai let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd survive this. They didn't just survive. They fought back. Alexander contacted the university's legal counsel first, filing a preemptive report about Julianne's harassment. He provided screenshots of her texts, a timeline of her threats, and a statement from Kai about their marriage, the contract, the circumstances, the bond. The dean called a formal hearing within a week. Kai sat in the conference room, Alexander beside him, their hands hidden under the table. Julianne sat across from them, her expression carefully neutral, her scent, beta, unreadable, betraying nothing. The dean, a tired-looking alpha named Dr. Hernandez, reviewed the evidence. "Dr. Carter, you're accused of harassment, blackmail, and conduct unbecoming a faculty member. Do you have a response?" Julianne smiled. "I have proof that Professor Volkov is in a sexual relationship with his student. That's a direct violation of university policy. The university's policy prohibits secret relationships that create a conflict of interest," Dr. Hernandez said. "Professor Volkov disclosed his marriage to me 3 months ago, when the bond was formed. I've been monitoring the situation to ensure no academic favoritism occurs." Kai's head snapped toward Alexander. "You told the dean?" Alexander's expression didn't change, but his hands squeezed Kai's under the table. "Later." Julianne's smile faltered. "You knew." "I knew," Dr. Hernandez said. "And I determined that Professor Volkov's actions, including recusing himself from grading Mr. Nakamura's final project, were sufficient to maintain academic integrity. Your threats, on the other hand, are not. The hearing lasted 2 hours. By the end, Julianne Carter was suspended pending termination, and Kai and Alexander were cleared of all wrongdoing. They walked out of the conference room hand in hand, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. "You told the dean," Kai said. "When?" "The day after your heat. I wouldn't let you be vulnerable to something like this. So I came clean. Told him everything. The contract, the bond, all of it." Kai stopped walking. "And he was okay with it. He was understanding." Alexander's lips quirked. "He also reminded me that the policy was written before secondary gender rights were fully codified, and that any legal challenge would likely result in the university's loss." "Practical man, Dr. Hernandez." Kai laughed, a surprised, relieved sound. "You're ridiculous." "I'm thorough." Alexander pulled him closer, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "And I love you." The words hung in the air between them. Kai's heart stopped. "What?" Alexander's gray eyes softened. "I love you, Kai. I think I've loved you since you fell asleep in the nest wearing my jacket, mumbling about your grandmother's cherry blossom tree. I wasn't ready to say it." Kai's eyes filled with tears. He threw his arms around Alexander's neck, buried his face in his shoulder, and breathed in cedarwood and snow. "I love you too," he whispered. "Even though you're the most infuriating alpha I've ever met." "I know," Alexander said, and Kai could hear the smile in his voice. "It's part of my charm." The graduation ceremony took place 18 months after the marriage certificate was signed, almost to the day. Kai stood on the stage in his cap and gown, his heart racing, his eyes scanning the crowd. His father was there, Naomi beside him in her wheelchair, both of them waving frantically. Sasha was in the third row, blowing kisses. And in the back, half hidden behind a pillar, stood Alexander Volkov, no longer his professor, but still very much his husband. The dean called Kai's name. He walked across the stage, accepted his diploma, and tried not to cry. Afterward, in the parking lot behind the auditorium, Alexander caught him. He was wearing a gray suit, Kai's favorite, and carrying a small velvet box. "What's that?" Kai asked, his voice suspicious. Alexander opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple silver, with small diamonds set into the band. The original marriage was a contract. A transaction. "I want to do this properly." He knelt down, right there in the parking lot, ignoring the stares of passing graduates. "Kai Nakamura, will you marry me?" "For real this time." Kai's eyes flooded with tears. "You're ridiculous." "Is that a yes?" "Yes, you idiot." "It's a yes." Alexander slid the ring onto Kai's finger, stood up, and kissed him in front of everyone. They got married again 4 months later, in Kai's grandmother's backyard, under the cherry blossom tree. Naomi was the flower girl, scattering petals from her wheelchair. Sasha was the best man. Alexander's sister Irina didn't come, but she sent a card, short, formal, but not unfriendly. It was a start. Kai's father walked him down the aisle, crying openly, and Kai cried too, because he was allowed to now. Allowed to be soft, allowed to be loved, allowed to be his omega self without shame. Alexander waited at the altar, his gray eyes bright, his scent warm with happiness. When Kai reached him, he took both of Kai's hands and held them tight. "I promise to love you," Alexander said, his voice steady, "not because a contract demands it, but because my heart has no other choice." Kai laughed through his tears. "I promise to put up with your grading standards, even though you gave me a B+ on my sustainable housing project. That project deserved the B+. The insulation calculations were off by 3%. See? This is why I love you." They kissed, the cherry blossoms falling around them like snow, and Kai's omega purred with satisfaction. Home, his instincts whispered. Alpha is home. And for the first time in his life, Kai believed it. Extra story. 1 year after the cherry blossom wedding, the rain started at exactly 8:47 p.m. Kai Nakamura Volkov knew this because he'd been watching the clock for the past hour, his leg bouncing under the table, his hands wrapped around a glass of champagne he hadn't touched. The restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city dissolving into watercolor smears of light, taxis hissing through flooded streets, umbrellas blooming like dark flowers. Across from him, Alexander Volkov was reading the dessert menu with the same intensity he brought to structural calculations. The chocolate lava cake has a 94% satisfaction rating across 600 reviews, Alexander said without looking up. The creme brulee is 89%, but with a smaller sample size. Statistically, the cake is the safer choice. Kai stared at him. We just had our 1-year anniversary dinner. We're waiting for them to bring out the special dessert the chef prepared. You're not supposed to be reading the menu. I'm being thorough. You're being you. Alexander finally looked up, his gray eyes warm behind his wire-rimmed glasses. A strand of dark hair had escaped its usual precise styling, falling across his forehead. Kai wanted to reach across the table and push it back. He also wanted to throw a bread roll at his husband's head. The two desires coexisted peacefully. I love you, Alexander said, as if that explained everything. Kai's irritation melted. It always did. I love you too. Even when you're impossible. I'm not impossible. I'm particular. The waiter arrived with their dessert, a towering confection of chocolate and raspberries, decorated with edible gold leaf and a small candle flickering in the center. Kai's anniversary gift to Alexander had been this dinner, chosen specifically because the restaurant's pastry chef had won a James Beard Award. Alexander's gift to Kai was currently sitting in a velvet box in his jacket pocket, though Kai didn't know that yet. Make a wish, the waiter said, setting down the plate. Kai closed his eyes. He wished for Naomi's health to stay stable. He wished for Sasha to finally ask out that girl from the coffee shop. He wished for Alexander to smile more. That real smile, the one that crinkled his eyes and made him look like he'd forgotten to be cold. He blew out the candle. What did you wish for? Alexander asked. If I tell you, it won't come true. Superstition is statistically insignificant. And yet, Kai cut into the cake, took a bite, and made a sound that was frankly inappropriate for a public setting. Oh my God, Alexander. You need to try this. Alexander leaned across the table, his lips parting, and Kai fed him a bite from his own fork. The alpha's eyes widened slightly, the equivalent of a standing ovation from anyone else. Adequate, Alexander said. You loved it. I found it acceptable. Kai laughed, and the sound echoed through the mostly empty restaurant. It was late, the dinner rush long over, and they were the last table. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. We should head home, Alexander said, though he made no move to stand. The forecast predicts worsening conditions. 5 more minutes. Kai took another bite of cake, savoring the chocolate and raspberry, and the way the candlelight made Alexander's cheekbones look even sharper. I want to remember this. Remember what? You, me, this. Kai gestured vaguely at everything. The rain, the candle, the half-eaten cake, the gold band on Alexander's left hand that matched the one on his own. A year ago, we were still pretending to hate each other. Now you're eating dessert off my fork in public. I'm not pretending to hate you. I'm merely being particular. Alexander's lips twitched. I was going to say reserved, but particular works. The waiter returned with the check. Alexander paid. He always paid, no matter how many times Kai argued, and helped Kai into his coat. The rain hadn't let up. They stood under the restaurant's awning, watching the water cascade off the roof, and Kai felt a familiar warmth build in his chest. Not heat. Not the kind that came with his cycle. Something else. Something softer. Run for it, Kai suggested. Alexander looked at the rain, then at Kai, then at the rain again. We'll get soaked. We'll dry. Your suit is Armani. It's also mine, and I don't care. Kai grabbed Alexander's hand and pulled him into the downpour. They ran, actually ran like teenagers, like people who weren't a tenured professor and his lecturer husband, splashing through puddles, laughing when Kai's shoe got stuck in a grate, gasping when a car drove past and sprayed them both. By the time they reached Alexander's Audi, Kai's Honda had finally died 6 months ago, mourned appropriately and then replaced. They were soaked through, shivering and grinning like idiots. "You're ridiculous," Alexander said, but his voice was fond, and his hand when he brushed rain off Kai's forehead was gentle. "You love it. I love you. The rain is incidental." They drove home through the storm, the windshield wipers working overtime, the heater blasting warmth against Kai's wet clothes. The apartment, their apartment now, not just Alexander's, remodeled after the wedding to include shared spaces and a much larger nest room, glowed warm and dry when they finally stumbled through the front door. "Shower," Alexander said. "You'll catch cold. We'll both shower." Conservation of resources. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "That's not how conservation works. It's how marriage works." They ended up in the master bathroom, shedding wet clothes onto the heated floor, steam fogging the mirrors. The shower was large enough for two. Alexander had designed the renovation himself, though he claimed it was purely for resale value, and the water pressure was perfect, hot and pounding against Kai's chilled skin. Alexander washed his hair. Kai returned the favor, working shampoo through Alexander's dark strands, watching the tension drain from his husband's shoulders. "Thank you," Alexander said quietly, his voice barely audible over the water. "For what? This year. This life. You?" He turned to face Kai, water streaming down his face, his gray eyes bright with something that looked like tears but couldn't be, because Alexander Volkov didn't cry. "I didn't think I deserved any of it." Kai's chest ached. He reached up, cupped Alexander's face in his hands, and kissed him, slow and deep, the way they'd learned to kiss over the past year. Not desperate like the first time, not careful like the early days, but confident. "No. You deserve everything," Kai said against his lips. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." They moved to the bedroom after the shower, wrapped in towels in each other. The apartment had changed since Kai had first moved in. The minimalist furniture remained, but now there were photos on the walls. Kai's grandmother's cherry blossom tree, Naomi at her first school dance, Sasha making a ridiculous face at a party. The bookshelves held manga alongside architectural journals. The kitchen had a collection of mismatched mugs, each one a gift from Kai's family. And the nest room. The nest room had become their room. Alexander had converted it after the wedding, tearing out the clinical emergency supply aesthetic and replacing it with something softer. The walls were now a warm cream color. The bed was enormous, piled with blankets and pillows in every shade of green and gray, Kai's favorite colors. A small shelf held books and candles. A window looked out over the city, the rain streaking down the glass. Kai's Omega had claimed this room within seconds of seeing the finished product. Safe, warm, alpha. "Come here," Alexander said, settling onto the bed, his back against the headboard. Kai went to him, crawling across the blankets until he was in Alexander's lap, his legs on either side of the alpha's hips. Alexander's hands found his waist, thumbs tracing circles against his skin. They were both still damp from the shower, Kai's dark hair curling at the ends, Alexander's stubble rough against his palm. "I have something for you," Alexander said. "Your anniversary gift." "My anniversary gift was the dinner. Dinner was your gift to me. This is different." Kai watched as Alexander reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out a velvet box, the one he'd been carrying in his jacket pocket all evening. He pressed it into Kai's hands. "Open it." Kai's fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. Inside was a key. Not a regular key. This one was silver, delicate, with a small charm attached, a cherry blossom, hand-painted in pink and white enamel. "What is this?" Kai asked, though he already knew. He could feel it in the way his heart was racing, in the way Alexander's scent had gone soft and hopeful. "It's a key to our family estate in Vermont. My grandfather's house." Alexander's voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. "The one I inherited. The one I told you about, the place where I spent summers as a child." Kai remembered. Alexander had mentioned it once. Late at night, his voice rough with memories he rarely shared. The old Victorian, on 20 acres of woodland. The pond where he'd learned to swim. The library with a rolling ladder, filled with books his grandfather had collected over 60 years. I want to take you there, Alexander continued. For our honeymoon. The one we never had because we were too busy pretending not to be married. He paused. I want to show you where I grew up. I want to walk through the woods with you. I want to... He stopped, his jaw tightening. You want to what? Alexander met his eyes. I want to build a life with you. Not just in this apartment. Not just in this city. Everywhere. I want to wake up next to you in my grandfather's house and watch the sun rise over the pond. I want to plant a garden with you, one that'll still be there when we're old. I want... Kai kissed him. He couldn't help it. Alexander was talking, actually talking, saying words Kai had been waiting to hear for months, and the only response his brain could process was kiss him. Kiss him now. Kiss him until he understands. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kai pressed his forehead against Alexander's. You want to plant a garden, Kai said, his voice cracking. Mr. The aesthetic is derivative. The structural calculations are off by 3%. You want to plant a garden. With you. Yes. Kai laughed, tears spilling down his cheeks. Yes. Obviously yes. 1,000 times yes. Alexander kissed his tears away, soft and careful, his lips trailing from Kai's cheekbones to his eyelids to the corner of his mouth. His hands slid up Kai's back, pulling him closer, and Kai went willingly, melting into the alpha's warmth. Tonight, Alexander murmured against his skin. I want to show you something else. Something I've been waiting to give you. You've already given me. Not yet. Alexander reached for the nightstand again, this time pulling out a small glass bottle. The liquid inside was amber gold, thick-looking, and Kai recognized it immediately. His breath caught. Scent oil, Kai whispered. You got scent oil. My scent. Distilled. Processed specifically for Alexander's ears turned red, and Kai realized he'd never seen his husband blush before. For intimate use. For marking you in a way that lasts longer than a bite. For claiming me, Kai finished. Alexander nodded. Kai's omegas surged forward, desperate and eager. He took the bottle from Alexander's hands, uncorked it, and the smell of cedarwood and snow filled the room, stronger than Alexander's natural scent, almost overwhelming in its intensity. Kai's body responded instantly, slick pooling, heat building low in his belly. Not yet, Alexander said, taking the bottle back. Let me take care of you. He poured a small amount of oil into his palm, warming it between his hands, and then his fingers found Kai's neck, the bond mark, faded now to silver, the place where Alexander's teeth had first claimed him. He pressed the oil into Kai's skin, massaging it in with slow, deliberate strokes, and Kai moaned. It felt like being branded. Like being loved. Every cell in his body recognized Alexander's scent, welcomed it, demanded more. More, Kai gasped. Please, Alpha. More. Alexander's eyes darkened. He poured more oil, and his hands moved lower down Kai's neck, across his collarbones, over his chest. He painted Kai's skin with his scent, marking every inch, turning Kai into a canvas of cedarwood and snow. You're beautiful like this, Alexander said, his voice rough, scent drunk and desperate. Mine. Yours, Kai agreed. Always yours. Alexander's hands reached Kai's hips, and then lower, and Kai's thoughts dissolved into static. The oil was warm, Alexander's fingers were skilled, and the bond between them hummed with pleasure, feedback loop of want and need and more. Bed, Kai managed. Alexander, bed, I need you. Alexander laid him down on the blankets, covering Kai's body with his own. The oil slicked between them, making every touch electric, every breath a shared prayer. Kai wrapped his legs around Alexander's waist and pulled him closer. Tell me, Alexander said, pausing at the entrance, his control fraying but not yet broken. Tell me what you need. You? Inside me. Marking me. Breeding me. Alexander's composure shattered. He pushed in slow and deep, and Kai's back arched off the bed. The oil made everything slick, everything easy, and the scent of cedarwood and snow and green tea and honey filled the room, tangled together, inseparable. Kai, Alexander groaned, his forehead pressed against Kai's. Kai. Move, Kai begged. Please, Alpha, move. Alexander moved. The rain continued outside, pounding against the windows, but Kai barely heard it. All he knew was Alexander's body against his, Alexander's scent in his lungs, Alexander's voice in his ear whispering praise and promises, and I love you, I love you, I love you. When Kai came, it was with Alexander's teeth in his neck, reopening the bond mark, pouring fresh claim into his bloodstream. Alexander followed seconds later, his knots swelling, locking them together, and Kai felt complete in a way he'd never known was possible. They lay there afterward, tangled in each other and the blankets, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Alexander's knot would take time to go down, 20 minutes, maybe 30, and neither of them was in a hurry. I meant what I said, Alexander murmured into Kai's hair. About the house, the garden, the life. I know. Kai pressed a kiss to Alexander's chest, right over his heart. Me too. We'll go next week. After finals. I've already arranged coverage for my classes. You planned this. Alexander's chest rumbled with a quiet laugh. I'm thorough. Kai smiled against his skin. You're particular. Same thing. They stayed in the nest room for the rest of the night, the key to the Vermont house on the nightstand, the scent oil empty on the floor, their bodies tangled and satisfied. The rain stopped sometime around 3 a.m. The city went quiet, and Kai fell asleep to the sound of Alexander's heartbeat, steady and warm beneath his ear. They left for Vermont the following Friday. Alexander drove because he didn't trust anyone else behind the wheel of his car, and Kai navigated because Alexander's sense of direction was statistically adequate but practically terrible. The drive took 4 hours, winding through hills that turned from gray to green as they left the city behind. The house was exactly as Alexander had described, a Victorian perched on a hill, overlooking a pond that glittered in the afternoon sun. The porch had a swing. The garden was overgrown. The library had a rolling ladder and smelled like old books and dust and home. Alexander stood in the doorway, his hands in his pockets, watching Kai explore. What do you think? He asked, and for once his voice wasn't certain. It was almost nervous. Kai turned in a slow circle, taking in the high ceilings, the hardwood floors, the fireplace big enough to roast a whole pig. Then he walked back to Alexander, took his husband's face in his hands, and kissed him. I think, Kai said, that we're going to be very happy here. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Kai smiled. Because I'm with you. Alexander's arms wrapped around his waist, pulling him close. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching the gold bands on their fingers, the silver bond mark on Kai's neck, the matching mark on Alexander's shoulder, hidden by his shirt but present, always present. Together, Alexander agreed. And in the quiet of the old house, surrounded by his grandfather's books and his husband's love, Alexander Volkov let himself believe it. Then,